The day I gave birth was supposed to be the moment my life finally felt stable. The moment everything I had endured for the last year made sense. The moment I could hold my child and feel like every sacrifice had been worth it. But instead, it became the day when every lie, every manipulation, every hidden intention around me cracked open like a glass floor under my feet, exposing a truth so twisted and humiliating that even now, when I replay it in my mind, I still feel that same sting in my chest as if the air had been punched out of me. I remember lying there in the hospital bed, exhausted, drained, still trembling from the delivery, my daughter swaddled beside me, tiny and warm, unaware that the world she was born into was not made of love and support but secrets and greed. My husband, Artham, had promised he would be there every second, that he would hold my hand, that he would speak for me, that he would protect me from his controlling, suffocating mother. But of course he wasn't there. He hadn't been there for months. He would come and go like a guest in his own marriage, popping into my life only when it suited him or when his mother wanted something. During the pregnancy, his mother, my mother-in-law, claimed it was her duty to manage things, to make decisions for me, because I was too emotional, to accompany me to appointments, because Aram was too busy. But the truth is, she wanted control, not just over me, but over every rupee, every decision, every aspect of this child's life, as if she had more claim to the baby than I did. She always reminded me how lucky I was to marry into their wealthy family, how I should be grateful, how she and Arham were doing me a favor by giving me a comfortable life, even though I saw nothing comfortable about constantly feeling like a burden they were tolerating. They acted like their money made them superior, but ironically, money was the one thing I never asked them for. I worked, I saved, I budgeted tightly. I bought baby clothes from sales. I reused everything I could. I kept telling myself I didn't need a luxurious nursery or designer baby blankets. What I needed was peace, support, and honesty. Simple things that neither my husband nor his mother knew how to give. The morning after the delivery, when the nurse stepped out for a moment, I heard a firm knock on the door, the kind you hear in offices, not hospitals. And before I could respond, the door opened and in walked my grandfather, my mother's father, the man I hadn't seen in years. He was rich, yes, extremely rich, but also dignified, quiet, the kind of man who didn't impose himself unless necessary. He lived abroad, traveled constantly, and rarely visited. So seeing him suddenly standing there was jarring. His eyes softened when he saw me, and he walked in slowly, his cane tapping the floor. But there was something else in his expression. Something sharp, calculating, confused, even disappointed. He looked at me, then at the room, then at the plain baby stroller I bought secondhand, then at the cheap diaper bag beside it, and his eyebrows furrowed. Then, without any warning, in a tone so calm it made me freeze, he asked, "Granddaughter, wasn't $250,000 per month enough for you?" I blinked, thinking I misheard. My throat tightened. "What money, Grandpa?" I asked, genuinely baffled. Before he could respond, the door swung open again, this time aggressively, and Aram and his mother walked in, loaded with bags from expensive designer stores, shopping that clearly hadn't been cheap, their faces lighting up as if they owned the hospital room and the child inside it. But the second they saw my grandfather, the bags slipped slightly in their hands, their smiles froze, and both of them looked like someone had ripped the air out of their lungs. The color drained from Arham's face instantly. My mother-in-law's lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. My grandfather turned toward them slowly, and the silence that filled the room was heavy enough to choke on. The bags, they Burberry, Dior, suddenly seemed louder than the beating of my own heart. My grandfather's gaze sharpened. "Interesting," he said quietly. "Very interesting." My husband's mother was the first to speak, stumbling over her words. "Papa, sir, what a surprise, you didn't tell us." But my grandfather cut her off with a single raise of his hand. "I asked my granddaughter a question," he said. "I would like her to answer." My husband looked at me like he was begging me not to say anything, not to ruin whatever game they had been playing, but I felt too weak, too tired, too confused to play along. "I don't know what you're talking about," I repeated softly. "What money?" My grandfather let out a slow exhale, as if confirming something he already suspected. "For the last 9 months," he said, "I have been sending 250,000 rupees every month to support you during your pregnancy. I sent it directly to your husband and mother-in-law because they insisted you needed comfort and that handling finances would stress you." My stomach dropped, and I swear the room tilted. Arham's hand trembled. My mother-in-law's jaw tightened as she tried to form an excuse, but only silence came out. My grandfather continued, "They said it was for your medical care, your nutrition, your comfort, your baby's needs." I stared at him horrified, because I had spent my entire pregnancy stretching every rupee, depriving myself, worrying constantly about money, reusing baby items, having anxiety attacks about bills. While all along, 250,000 rupees had been coming every single month. But not to me, never to me, And as I slowly looked at the designer bags in their hands, the ones they carried proudly into my hospital room, something inside me snapped. The betrayal wasn't just shocking. It was suffocating. And when my grandfather looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I think it's time you know everything," I realized this wasn't the beginning of a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of a war. The moment my grandfather said those words, "I think it's time you know everything," it felt like the air in the room thickened, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to hear what would come next. Aram and his mother both stiffened, their bodies going rigid like they had been caught stealing with their hands still inside the drawer. I could see the panic rising in their faces, the kind that comes when someone realizes the lies they built so carefully are about to collapse right in front of the one person they never wanted to know the truth. And I lay there, in that fragile hospital bed, my newborn sleeping peacefully beside me, while the two people who were supposed to support me looked more terrified than guilty, as if getting exposed was a bigger crime than the betrayal itself. My grandfather pulled up the chair beside my bed, rested both hands on the cane in front of him, and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. A mix of anger, sorrow, and a strange disappointment, not at me, but at the people who stood trembling across the room. 9 months, he began quietly, but the softness in his voice only made the weight of his words heavier. Every single month, 250,000, sent immediately, on time, without a single delay, because I was told my granddaughter needed it, that she was struggling, that she was living in stress, that her husband was trying his best, but his job was unstable, and they were worried about her health. His eyes shifted to Aram, who swallowed hard, still clutching the handles of the shopping bags like evidence of his guilt. And yet, my grandfather continued, "When I walked into the house 2 weeks ago for a surprise visit, your husband told me you were sleeping because you were tired from hormones, and your mother-in-law told me not to disturb you because pregnant women can become hysterical. But what I saw was not stress." He paused, and the silence stretched. I saw a newly renovated drawing room, new furniture, imported carpets, a 70-inch television, and the two of them eating at a restaurant every night, charging everything to the card I provided for medical emergencies. My heart dropped so hard I felt it in my spine. My mother-in-law let out a shaky breath, trying desperately to compose herself. "Papa, please. Listen, we can explain," she stammered. "You misunderstood. It wasn't. She didn't need? Be silent." My grandfather snapped, and the tone of his voice was so sharp that even the baby stirred. My mother-in-law's lips shut instantly. For the first time in years, someone existed who could silence her. My grandfather turned back to me. "Do you know," he asked softly, "that when I asked him," he pointed his cane at Arham, "why you looked so thin in the pictures, why your cheeks were hollow, why you looked exhausted, he told me you were dieting because you were insecure about weight gain." My breath caught painfully in my chest, because I remembered that argument. I remembered crying over not having money for proper supplements. I remembered standing in the kitchen, eating half portions so the groceries would last longer. And the whole time, my husband actually told people I was dieting. A hot wave of humiliation washed over me. Aram finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Data, please, it wasn't like that. I was going to tell her. I was waiting for the right time." My grandfather's laugh was cold, an unrecognizable sound from a man known for his dignity. "The right time," he repeated. "You had 9 months of right time. But instead, you spent the money on vacations, clothes, gadgets, furniture, and when I told you I was coming today to see my great-granddaughter, you both pretended everything was normal, and you even stopped by the mall before coming to show off these," he said, gesturing to the overpriced shopping bags in their hands. I stared at Aram, my husband, the man I married, believing he was kind, responsible, decent. But in that moment he looked like a stranger. No, worse. He looked like a coward who knew his entire world was about to shatter. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally asked, my voice barely audible, but filled with a pain that made both of them flinch. Why wasn't the money used for my medical bills? Why did I struggle the whole pregnancy? Why did I have to budget everything? Why did I think we were broke when my grandfather was sending enough to make sure our child had the best start in life? Arham opened his mouth but only stuttered. His mother cut in quickly, desperate to save herself. "Beta, listen. Your grandfather only sent the money because Arham told him your own family didn't want to support you. He said you were ashamed to ask for help. We were thinking about your dignity. We didn't want you to feel like... You didn't want me to feel." I snapped, disbelief twisting in my voice. I collapsed from stress in my 7th month. I had nights where I couldn't sleep because I didn't know how we would manage hospital bills. And all this time, you were using money meant for my baby to renovate your drawing room. The truth finally became clear. Ugly, sharp, unforgiving. They never thought about me. They never cared about the baby. The money was simply an opportunity. A lifestyle upgrade. a chance to live like royalty using funds that weren't theirs. But my grandfather wasn't done. "And there's more," he said, his voice quieter now, almost dangerous. Arham's mother squeezed his arm, silently pleading. Arham's legs wobbled as if feeling the weight of what was coming. My grandfather leaned forward slightly. "You remember how your mother-in-law told you not to work, that you should quit your job for the baby, that she and Arham would take care of everything?" I nodded weakly. That conversation had turned into a huge fight, because the moment I resigned, my financial independence disappeared. My grandfather took a deep breath. "They asked me to send extra money because they said you were too fragile to earn on your own." My stomach churned violently. My mother-in-law's eyes widened with panic. Arm looked like he was about to faint. "They told me you were so emotional, so stressed, so unstable that they needed funds to manage you." Heat rushed to my face. Rage, humiliation, betrayal. Everything mixed into something so sharp it almost numbed me. My grandfather's next words landed like a bomb. "So all this time your pregnancy wasn't the only thing they were controlling. They were using you. Your baby. Your vulnerability. They built an entire life off money meant for you, and had the audacity to make you feel like a burden in your own marriage." I felt something inside me shatter. Not out of weakness, but out of clarity, because suddenly it became obvious. This wasn't simple selfishness. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was exploitation, calculated, consistent, cold-blooded. And when my grandfather stood up and said, "I will not allow another day of this," my mother-in-law took a step back in fear. Arham's lips trembled as he whispered my name, as if begging me to protect him from the storm he had created. But it was too late. The truth was out. And my voice, when I finally spoke, came out steady, cold, unrecognizable even to myself. "Data, what do we do now?" Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about betrayal that ruined a marriage, destroyed trust, and turned the birth of my child into the beginning of a reckoning they never expected. When I asked my grandfather, "Data, what do we do now?" the room shifted again. Like the air tightened and every breath suddenly mattered. Arham stepped forward as if he wanted to speak, but my grandfather didn't even look at him. He simply raised his hand slightly. Calm, steady, powerful, and Arham froze mid-step like a child caught lying with chocolate smeared all over his face. My mother-in-law's fingers trembled on her expensive shopping bags, her knuckles white, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape route. But there was none. Not anymore. My grandfather turned to me, his expression softening for the first time since he walked in. "Betta," he said quietly, "you have suffered enough. More than enough. A woman who is pregnant needs love, security, comfort. Not fear, not manipulation, not this humiliation." His voice wavered a little, and I realized then that he wasn't just angry, he was hurt. Hurt that I had gone through months of hardship while he believed I was being cared for. Hurt that the people I trusted had been smiling to his face while stealing from his granddaughter behind his back. "But before anything," he continued, "I need to hear something from you, and I want you to be honest with me." I nodded, though my throat felt too tight to speak. He leaned a little closer, his eyes searching mine. "Do you want to stay with this man?" The question hit harder than any slap could. Arham jerked his head up, eyes widening in shock, panic instantly flashing across his face. "Data? What? No, listen. Please, she wants to." But my grandfather didn't permit him even one excuse. "I am asking her," he said sharply, not even sparing him a glance. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Because for 9 months I had convinced myself that things would improve after the baby. That once Arham held her, once he became a father, he would change, he would mature, he would show the love and responsibility he had forgotten. But seeing him now, the fear in his eyes wasn't because he feared losing me. It was because he feared losing the lifestyle he built on my grandfather's money. And that hurt far more than the lies. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. "Data, I wanted to believe he cared. But I looked at Arham, searching for even a spark of remorse. Something real, something human. But all I saw was desperation. Not for me, not for our daughter, but for himself. But now I realize I was alone the entire pregnancy. He wasn't there. He didn't protect me. He didn't even bother to ask how I was." Arham tried to cut in. "I did. I asked. You asked." I snapped, my voice echoing painfully off the hospital walls. "You asked once every few days, then went out with your friends while I cried myself to sleep wondering if I would be able to afford medicine. You asked when your mother told you to pretend you cared. You asked when someone else was watching." Arham's face crumpled, but I didn't stop. Months of suppressed emotions surged through me, boiling, spilling, burning. "You made me feel like a burden. You let your mother insult me. You let her control everything. You let her guilt trip me into quitting my job. And meanwhile," my eyes slowly drifted to the luxury bags in his hands. "You too lived your best life." Arham's shoulders collapsed. His mother stepped forward, her voice trembling with forced sweetness. "Betta, listen. Pregnancy makes women emotional. You're overthinking. We never met? Overthinking. I repeated, my chest tightening with disbelief. Was I overthinking when I begged you for help because the doctor recommended supplements we couldn't afford? Was I overthinking when I fainted in the kitchen because I skipped meals so groceries would last the month? Was I overthinking when I asked why money always disappeared and you said unexpected bills? My mother-in-law's face twisted, the fake sympathy melting into irritation. You should be grateful, she muttered under her breath. We did so much for you. You live in our house. You eat our food. Our son no ouch? My grandfather thundered, slamming the tip of his cane on the hospital floor so hard that even the baby stirred. My mother-in-law went silent instantly, fear flickering across her face. My grandfather turned to me again. Answer me honestly, he said. Do you want to stay with him? I looked at Aram, and in that moment, in the sterile light of that hospital room, I realized something painfully simple. I didn't love who he had become. Or maybe he had always been this person, and I simply never saw it. No, I whispered. Arham staggered back as if I had physically pushed him. No, he repeated, his voice cracking. You don't mean that. You're upset. You're overwhelmed. I meant it, I said, my voice gaining strength. I gave you every chance. I trusted you. I believed you. Even when your mother insulted me, even when you ignored me, even when you blamed me for everything, you were my husband. I kept forgiving you because I thought our child deserved a father. He stepped closer, desperate, trembling. She does! She does deserve a father! I can change. I swear. I will. Just don't do this now. Not here. But it was too late. My grandfather placed a hand on my shoulder gently, grounding me, supporting me. Then it settled, he said. You and the baby are leaving with me. The shock on Arham's face was instant, followed by panic so raw it was almost pathetic. No, please. Dada, don't take her. She's my wife, my child, my family. My grandfather finally turned to him with a glare that could have frozen fire. Your wife, he repeated. You treated her like a bank account, like a maid, like a punching bag for your laziness. And your child, Arham's lips wobbled. I love her, I do. I'll be a good father, I promise. A father, my grandfather said, voice dropping dangerously low. A father does not starve the mother of his child. A father does not steal money meant for prenatal care. A father does not disappear while his wife cries alone at night. Arham's breath hitched. His mother rushed forward, trying to salvage what was left. Papa, wait, we can fix this. We didn't mean any harm. We were only trying to manage things. You managed the money very well. My grandfather replied coldly. That drawing room looks like a palace. Her face blazed with humiliation. What do you plan to do? She asked, voice cracking. Throw us out. Ruin our lives. My grandfather's reply was slow and devastating. Not yet, he said. First, I will destroy every lie you built. Then I will decide what to do with the two of you. Arham dropped to his knees beside my bed, gripping the frame as tears streamed down his face. Please, don't take her away. Don't take my daughter. Don't leave me. For months I had begged him to care. For months I had cried alone. For months I waited for him to choose me. But now that the truth was out, now that the money was exposed, now that he realized what he was losing, now he cried. And it was too late. I looked away from him, toward my sleeping newborn, and whispered the only truth left inside me. You lost me long before today. And in that moment, with my grandfather standing beside me and my newborn daughter softly breathing in her crib, I realized the truth about this new chapter of my life. Leaving wasn't the end. It was the beginning. When I said those words, you lost me long before today, something shifted so sharply in the room that even the beeping machine seemed to pause. Arham's mother grabbed his arm, trying to pull him up, but he stayed kneeling beside the bed like a man begging for mercy at a place where mercy no longer existed. His tears came in heavy, desperate bursts, the kind that weren't born from love or regret but from fear. Fear of losing control, fear of losing access, fear of losing the comfortable life he built off lies and my grandfather's money. My grandfather watched him with an expression that was neither anger nor pity, just a cold, exhausted disappointment, like a teacher who finally sees the student's true nature after months of excuses. He placed his hand gently on my shoulder and spoke in a stern, calm voice. Beta, gather your strength. We are leaving soon. You and your daughter will be safe with me. His words, warm and protective, wrapped around me like a blanket I hadn't felt in years. But they also ignited a fury in Arham's mother, a fury she had kept politely tucked away behind fake sweetness and manipulative smiles. She straightened up, puffed her chest, wiped her face, and snapped. You can't just take her. This is her marital home. She has responsibilities. She can't leave whenever she feels emotional. My grandfather slowly turned his eyes toward her, and the look he gave her could have shattered stone. Emotional, he repeated. Creating an entire pregnancy of starvation, stress, and lies, and you call her emotional? She flinched but tried again, her voice rising now, fueled by panic. She is married, and the child belongs to this family. She can't just walk out. What will people say? I finally looked directly at her, something I had avoided for months because every time I met her eyes, I felt smaller, weaker, unworthy. But now, after everything, I felt strength rising in me like a tide. People already say everything about me, I said quietly. You made sure of it. You told neighbors I was ungrateful. You told your relatives I was lazy. You told your friends I was emotional and difficult. You shaped my reputation long before today. Her lips tightened. Artem stood up slowly, stumbling a little, his eyes red and swollen. Stop it, he whispered to his mother. Not now. Please not now. Let me talk to her. But his mother refused to be silenced, not by him, not by my grandfather, not by the truth hanging in the air like a noose. She's not going anywhere, she shouted. You can't take her from this house, Papa. She owes us respect. She owes us gratitude. She owes us. My grandfather slammed the tip of his cane against the floor again, this time harder, sharper, louder, so loud the baby stirred and a nurse walking by paused outside the window. She owes you not, Hiji, he declared, his voice echoing through the room. Their faces froze. My grandfather stepped forward, closer to them, towering in authority even with his cane. For 9 months, while you two lived off my money like parasites, she suffered. You kept her in fear. You deprived her. You lied to her. You manipulated her. You treated her like someone who didn't matter. His voice grew colder, heavier. And now you want to imprison her in that house. Arham lowered his head, shame swallowing him whole. But his mother couldn't accept defeat. She clutched her son's arm and hissed, Say something! She can't just leave! If she leaves, everyone will blame us! They'll say we are monsters! Arham's voice finally cracked. They're right, he whispered. His mother turned toward him slowly, disbelief flooding her face. What did you say? But Arham wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me, really looking at me for the first time since our wedding day. His voice trembled. She's right, I let everything get out of control. I ignored her. I ignored the baby. I listened to you more than I listened to my wife. I didn't even know she was suffering because I never bothered to check. His mother grabbed him by the shoulder fiercely. You ungrateful, how dare you say that after everything I did for you? But he shrugged her off, gently but firmly. Ami, stop. She froze, stunned. I could practically see a lifetime of control slipping through her fingers. She doesn't want to stay. Arham continued, tears spilling again. And she has every right to leave. I don't know what hurt more, his late realization or the fact that it came only when he feared losing something. But I didn't dwell on it. My grandfather stepped back toward me, his hand warm on my arm. Your bags are already in the car, he said quietly. I packed them myself this morning when I came to check on you and saw how alone you were. I covered my mouth, tears gathering in my eyes, not from heartbreak, but from relief. Pure, unfiltered relief. The nurse walked in then, offering to help transfer the baby into the portable bassinet. I nodded, wiping my cheeks, as she gently lifted my daughter. My mother-in-law moved forward abruptly as if to stop her. Where are you taking my granddaughter? She cried. She belongs to our family. My grandfather stepped in front of her, blocking her path. You don't get to claim a child you didn't even care enough to protect, he said fiercely. She stood frozen, speechless. Arham stepped forward too, but this time he didn't try to stop me. He touched the edge of the baby's blanket, tears dripping off his chin. Please, he whispered. Just don't take her far. Let me be in her life. Let me try. His voice cracked at the last word. I looked at him. This broken man who made excuses instead of apologies, who cried now but never when it mattered, and I felt a strange mix of sadness and clarity. Arham, I said softly, being a father is not something you decide after the damage is done. It's something you do from the first moment you find out you're going to be one. His shoulders slumped. I know, he whispered. I know. My grandfather squeezed my hand, signaling that it was time. I carefully stood up with the nurse's help, still weak from childbirth but supported by a strength I hadn't felt in months. As we moved toward the door, my mother-in-law collapsed onto the chair, sobbing, not out of love, but out of loss of power. Arham sank to the floor again, covering his face with both hands. My grandfather guided me out of the room, walking protectively beside me, his cane tapping softly on the tiles. But just as we were about to exit, Arham called out my name, broken, desperate, raw. Please don't let this be goodbye. I paused for only a second. Then I turned slightly, just enough for him to see the truth on my face. Goodbye happened long before today, I said quietly. And with that, I stepped out of the room. Out of the marriage that suffocated me, out of the lies that drained me, out of the home that never felt like home, into a future that was finally mine. My daughter slept peacefully in her bassinet as my grandfather guided me toward the elevator. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something powerful rising inside my chest, freedom. And the story of how I rebuilt my life after their betrayal. That was only just beginning. I thought the chaos had finally settled. that the dust had cleared enough for me to breathe without feeling like the entire world was leaning over my shoulder waiting for me to break again. But Section 5 of my life didn't arrive quietly. It crashed in like a door someone kicks open with full force. It happened 3 weeks after everything exploded. 3 weeks after the truth came out, after the apologies, after the shattered pieces of my life were awkwardly taped back together. I was sitting alone in my apartment, lights dimmed. The silence heavy, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, but reminds you that you're still carrying damage you haven't fully admitted to yet. That's when my phone buzzed. Not a normal vibration, but the long, aggressive kind that only happens when someone calls back. Back like they're desperate. When I checked, I froze. It was her. The person who started all of this. The lie maker. The detonator who blew up my relationships, my reputation, and months of my peace. She had the audacity to call me like we were old friends catching up. I didn't answer. I watched the phone blink and buzz until it stopped. I shouldn't have cared. I shouldn't have felt anything. But the truth is, trauma makes you hyper-aware of patterns, and something about the timing felt off. Too deliberate. Too calculated. I blocked her again. Even though I had already blocked her on everything weeks ago. Some people find ways to crawl back into your life, through cracks you didn't know existed. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning I woke up to a knock on my door, not the polite, neighborly tap. The heavy, rhythmic, open up kind of knocking that makes your lungs freeze. When I opened it, the last person I expected was standing there, her older brother, the one who used to be calm, level-headed, neutral. But right now, he looked like someone who hadn't slept, someone carrying anger in his jaw and apology in his eyes. He didn't wait to be invited in. He stepped inside like he was afraid he'd lose his courage if he stayed in the hallway. And then he did something I never saw coming. He apologized. Not the weak, scripted kind, the raw voice shaking, guilt-soaked apology of someone who finally understood just how destructive silence could be. He told me everything I wasn't supposed to know. Things that made my stomach twist. Things that made the entire story snap into even darker clarity. Turns out, she hadn't just lied about me. She had lied about multiple people over the years. Exes, coworkers, friends. She created chaos like it was a hobby, and every time she got caught, her family covered it up. They shielded her, enabled her, smoothed over her messes so she never had to face consequences, never had to learn the weight a lie could carry when it lands on someone else's life. But this time, her lie spiraled too far, and when her parents tried to fix it quietly, it only made her double down. And now she was unraveling, mentally, emotionally, socially. She wasn't calling me to apologize. She was calling because she wanted me to save her, to clear her name the way I cleared mine, to stand up publicly and say I forgave her. So the backlash she was finally facing wouldn't swallow her whole. Her brother begged me not to help her, but to stay far, far away. She's unstable right now, he said. She's desperate. And when she's desperate, she gets dangerous. He told me she'd been showing up at my old job, asking about me. Driving past my parents' street. Connected. That one sentence made every hair on my body stand. Still connected. To me. After everything she destroyed. No, absolutely not. That's when the fear I'd buried under anger and exhaustion began crawling back up my spine. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because some people don't accept the ending you give them. They write their own. And she was about to write one with my name in it.